Hi everyone, we'll get started in just 1 second.
Thanks for calling ARC. We make documents and information work harder so you don't have to. Print your plans or put them on the cloud so everyone can find them.
Welcome everyone. We'll be with you in just 1 minute. Welcome everyone. Thanks for your patience there. I want to thank you for joining us today to talk about the top tips for choosing and implementing construction document management software. Try star one.
Thanks for calling ARC.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience there. We just had a little difficulty. I want to thank you for joining us today to talk about the top tips for choosing and implementing construction document management software. This is presented by SKYSITE and ARC Document Solutions Company. I'm Sherilyn Hill and I'll be your host for today's webcast. Now, before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping details to cover, naturally. First, we are recording the webinar and it will be sent to you via email, so don't worry if you can't stay for the entire discussion. Next, this is a discussion and we really encourage your participation. If you have any questions throughout, just simply submit them in the chat box. It's over there on the right-hand side of your screen. We've saved plenty of time at the end for Q&A, so go ahead and ask away. Lastly, we have a few poll questions to ask you throughout today's webcast, and we really ask that you participate. They're easy, multiple choice questions, and there isn't a right or wrong answer, so please help us out with those. Okay, so now that we've covered those details for the webcast, let's move on to the agenda. We'll have a brief introduction to today's speaker, and that'll include a little bit about his background and experience. Then we'll jump into why the construction industry is changing to cloud-based document management solutions. From there, we'll cover important factors to investigate when you're researching options, as well as the best practices for implementation once you've chosen your solution. And then throughout, we'll provide some stories of how our customers went through this process, so some useful tips that we've gotten from them. Lastly, again, we've saved 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So now that we've got all of that taken care of, let me introduce you to our speaker, Kevin Leatham.
Yeah, thanks, Sherilyn. So I am currently product manager for SKYSITE Projects, our construction management solution developed by Arc Document Solutions. My background is in general contracting. So prior to coming to ARC, I worked in the San Francisco Bay Area on a number of large commercial projects, including tech campuses, hospitals, and public works projects. So I'll be talking a little bit today about my experience choosing a construction management solution and some of my suggestions and tips based off of my experience.
Thanks, Kevin. So before we really dive into all of this, let's just jump right to the first poll question. And that is, where in the process of choosing a solution are you? We'll give you 45 seconds to choose your answer, which are just starting out. Are you research and testing? Are you requesting proposals? Are you ready to buy? Please let us know. This helps us out a lot. And answers are coming in. Actually, we're not getting the answers that we like. Oh, there you go, everybody. Perfect. We've got a couple tight races for just starting out, and that's actually taken over, and time is up. So it looks like the majority of you are just starting out, followed by a lot of you are research and testing. So we appreciate you helping us out with that poll. Thanks for the participation. And I'm going to send it back to Kevin, and he's going to break down the steps for choosing your construction management software.
Yeah, thanks, Sherilyn. So to kick off today's discussion, I wanted to talk about why we're all on this call today, discussing construction document management software. So as a company, ARC and SKYSITE have done tons and tons of research on the data entry and collection process in the construction industry. But the statistics we're looking at here today, which was a survey conducted by TrackVia, I thought highlighted the issues best. So from looking at these stats, you can see that nearly half of construction managers still use manual methods to collect project information. Right? What does that tell us? It tells us there's a large opportunity for growth in the construction tech space, and many of you probably on this phone call are still collecting data manually. Approximately 90% of the survey participants said they spend approximately 1,300 hours organizing this information annually and turning it into something useful. So that's a significant amount of time to spend on something that's often automated nowadays, and that's often where users find their biggest return on investment, right? That's why we pay for a software provider, is to collect data, but then be able to use that data to our advantage. In addition, participants reported that they received incomplete information, missed change order opportunities, and overall thought that digitization would resolve these issues. So that's brief, but it sets the groundwork for the remainder of this webinar. And for now, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sherilyn with our next poll question.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Before we take a deep dive into those 6 tips to successfully choose a platform, we want to know, how do you currently manage your project documents? We just heard how so many managers are wasting their time. using manual methods. So what are you using? Are you using paper? Are you using generic solutions? Are you using Excel? A combination of both? Or are you using another construction management solution? Already lots of answers are coming in. I don't think I'm surprised to see that it's a combination of all of those. We'll give you about 15 more seconds on this. And time is up. And it looks like, again, no surprise that people are using a combination of above, and that a lot of you are also using the generic solutions, which are great, but maybe not the right thing for the job. So with that, we'll get back to Kevin and those 6 tips.
Great, thank you for everybody's answers today. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it, some suggestions and tips for choosing a solution and evaluating softwares. The first tip here is reinforcing the importance of references. So speaking with other end users about how they use the software, the benefits that they get from it, and so on, really provides critical insight into the true capabilities of a solution. This is what I often call the trust but verify technique. Right? Software solutions will list what functionalities their software can provide, but validating that the workflows fit the needs of similar companies or your company is critical in the process. This is also a way to get an unbiased opinion of a software, right? These people are not trying to sell it to you. They'll simply be able to explain to you how they're using it and what's working for them and what doesn't. Moving on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to test and interview. So what this means is almost every software these days provides some sort of free trial. The important part is you actually have to use it. So try uploading some of your own documents to see how the software works for you, rather than utilizing the sample documents that are often provided by the software provider. The reason for this is the software provider's documents are probably ideal for the software and everything's going to work properly. But if you upload your own documents, you'll be able to visualize how the software works and looks if you were to adopt it. Once you've had the chance to try the free trial, you need to get your questions answered. That's the interview part. This can be done in a live demonstration with a sales representative. It can be done by calling the support team, or even referencing available support articles that many software providers offer.
And Kevin, one other way to look at this too is to make a wish list of all the features you want. And then as you begin to evaluate and actually use the trials, that will help you determine the features that you actually need, the ones that you will use on the job site. So that way you can evaluate solutions that fulfill those needs, as opposed to, you know, getting something that everyone else has and may have a lot of features that you'll never use.
Yeah, thanks, Sherilyn. And that's actually a fantastic segue into our next tip of establishing goals. So Sherilyn touched on this briefly, but you don't want to start the search for a solution until you actually know what you're looking for. There's too many options available nowadays to start your search blind. There's probably thousands of applications, and this will leave you exhausted and worn out trying to evaluate each and every software. So before you start your search, create a list of must-haves and clearly define what you're hoping to improve with the use of the software. This will help you to quickly eliminate a number of solutions and will speed up the evaluation process. So you need to decide what's a luxury versus what's a necessity, right? And then as you prioritize those, it'll help you in selecting a solution.
So I also had a customer tell me about another option for searching for a construction management solution. They actually hired a consulting firm to help them navigate through all the different software, the options, the features, the benefits that they would get, everything available on all the platforms. They really help them navigate through all of that. and help define their goals, their needs, and they found that to be very valuable using a consultant to help with that.
Yeah, several of our customers have found consultants to be valuable, but even then you still need to have an idea of what your goals are in the process and what you're looking for to be able to work hand in hand with that consultant.
Absolutely.
Moving on to tip number 4, this is to include team members in the evaluation process. So we already talked about utilizing free trials, but collaborating with a team member on that free trial is crucial. This will allow you to see how the sharing and data exchange process works, evaluate things like permissions, and some other fundamental functionalities that are critical to softwares. In all likelihood, you're not the only user within your company that will be adopting the software, and people have different preferences. So this will create buy-in later on in the implementation process once a solution is chosen. Users are more likely to adopt the solution if you involve them early on in the process, and we'll talk about that later in today's webinar, that implementation is the most difficult part of this entire process. Tip number 5 is don't go generic. So I previously mentioned that there's lots of softwares available nowadays, so you don't need to settle for one that doesn't fit your needs or isn't built specifically for you. What I mean by that is some softwares are designed for a consumer and less so for an organization or company. Others are primarily designed for mobile rather than desktops. And in this specific instance, some are designed for construction, while others are designed for general business needs. So this ties in with tip 3 of establishing goals, because understanding what you want is critical in the selection process. The other recommendation worth noting is don't choose a solution simply because everybody uses it, right? If lots of people are using the software, there's probably a good reason for that, but this shouldn't be your primary decision maker. Confirming that the software will help you improve your everyday workflows and will help you get your return on investment should be of higher priority. When I was working for a general contractor, we often used generic document management software to send large files and to store large files. But this created a number of limitations for our team that can be addressed specifically with construction management software. Our final tip here for choosing a solution is to evaluate support systems in the process. So this can consist of evaluating if they only offer email support versus phone support, if phone support is 24/7 or if it's only during working hours, if they have an available knowledge base, and so on. Another item worth looking into is what sort of training is available with the software, right? Will you be training your team, or is that something that's included in your licensing fee? And then this is going to tie into our discussion shortly about implementation. But before we talk about implementation, I'm going to hand it back to Sherilyn for our third poll question.
Thanks, Kevin. We're sure many of you have looked into solutions, so we want to know, what is your biggest obstacle to implementation? Is it training, pushback from the field? Could it be the budget? Maybe finding the right fit for your team, or that it could take too much time to train and implement, that it would actually take you away from the jobs. We've got the clock running, and again, we appreciate all those answers. So what is your biggest obstacle to implementation? Got about 10 more seconds, so keep it coming. A pretty good breakdown coming up there. And right now we are closing the polls. And it looks like a pretty tight race between budget and finding the right fit for your team. But there was plenty that also said pushback from the field and the time to train, which those are all very important obstacles. Again, thank you everyone for participating. And now we're going to get back to Kevin and get to those best practices for implementation.
Yeah, thanks, Sherilyn. In my experience, that previous poll question really was a combination of all those answers, which is probably why we had a widespread of answers to that poll question. So before we jump into the challenges of implementation, I wanted to talk about some of the questions and difficulties with that implementation process. So choosing a solution is one thing, but as I mentioned previously, the implementation is even more difficult. So you're going to get questions like, how do I encourage adoption on the job site? How should I respond to resistance, and so on? Make sure that you consider these questions before you push out the software to somebody within your company. Right? You want to know how to respond to these prior to giving somebody a solution to test and play around with before actually implementing it company-wide. This will just encourage, again, users to adopt the software, but also it instills confidence in your team that you've thought about all these challenges you're going to face. So thanks for the answers to the poll question. We'll go ahead and jump into the first tip for implementation. So this tip came directly from a customer of ours, Millstone Management. They suggested to start by implementing the solution on a pilot project, and then when you do choose that project, make sure you choose a project with staff that you can rely on. Right? The staff is actually going to have to use the software, and they're going to be champions within your company that other users can go to for questions. If the pilot project goes well, you can look to push out the software to additional projects. If it doesn't, you need to stop, evaluate why, and then determine your next steps. This is really an extension of our test and interview process that I mentioned during the choosing a solution discussion. We'll go ahead and jump to the second tip here for implementation, which is to schedule training. Now, training can come in a variety of different methods, and it can be provided to a variety of different people, right? This could be the vendor training the champions within your company. It could be the champions in your company training other end users. The important thing is, despite software becoming easier and easier to use, you're still going to need training. So you'll have to consider all end users, especially those that are more technologically challenged in this process.
And one thing that's important to remember is that people learn differently. Some people may prefer peer-to-peer learning. Others learn better from watching videos. Some people just reading instructions laid out, 1, 2, 3, they learn better that way. So make sure that you have options for training for your team so that everyone can learn the platform at their speed. And this will really help with the adoption of the technology.
Thanks, Sherilyn. We're going to go ahead and jump to tip 3 for implementation, and that is to validate use. So often when we're evaluating a solution and we finally choose one, we think that our job's done and everything's working great. In reality, that's not the case, right? Even though you might be training your team on the solution, you chose something, it still doesn't mean that it's actually being used. So if the software is in fact being used and adopted by your team, ensure that they're benefiting from it and they see time savings. If not, there might be a learning curve at first, but it's important to reinforce to them how it's going to save them time and make them more productive in the long run. We'll go ahead and jump to tip number 4, which is to scale as necessary. What this means is start using a tool in pieces rather than overwhelming your team with a solution that can do dozens and dozens of things. So this is similar to selecting a pilot project, but selecting a tool within a software that you want to implement first. This could be something like picking one workflow, such as the RFI workflow, and implementing this, and then later on implementing a submittal workflow that's also available in that software. The important thing is this makes implementation much more manageable for all end users.
So Kevin, I remember talking to a customer that told me exactly that they started out using markup tools and document sharing for the first project and really got everyone familiar using those tools. And once they were comfortable, for the next project, they added RFIs, punch lists, and submittals. and it really kept the implementation from becoming overwhelming for their team, and they really found that a big benefit to implementation and to keep people using the tool and not just stop using it.
Exactly, and how you implement these tools should correspond with your training schedule, the previous implementation tip that we discussed. So we're going to move on to developing tips and tricks. As you're using the software and become familiar with it, you're going to find shortcuts for things and little intricacies that you can share with your wider team. Taking note of these and creating a tips and tricks document is going to speed up the learning process. This is often going to be developed by your champions originally, and then can be expanded upon as you push out the software to a wider user base. This can also be a reference sheet for users if they forget how to perform tasks within the software, and you can pass it from project to project. So the quicker that users are able to pick up on a software and the easier they find it to use, the more likely they are to adopt it. Now I'm going to jump to our last tip for implementation during this webinar, which is encouraging the use of support tools. So we touched on this briefly, but there's a number of support tools often provided by the software provider. Links to these support tools can be found on the marketing website, or sometimes even within the software that you purchased. And depending on the solution that you choose or the package you choose, the availability of these support tools is going to vary. Now, when I keep saying support tools, I mean things like help videos, articles, you can search YouTube even, or simply staying in touch with your professional service or customer success manager, if that's included in your licensing package. So at this point, we've talked about some tips for what to look for when selecting a construction management software, and also some tips on how to implement it. But I'd like to think about next steps. So before you get too far in your search, we've discussed prioritizing your needs and discussing as a team what's most important. What are you trying to achieve? I'm listing 5 items here on the slide. You have to pick and choose 1 through 5. Which is most important and which is least important? Is it the features and tools within the software? Is it the reliability of the software and the fact that it's only down during a scheduled downtime? Is it cost, right? Is that going to heavily influence which solution you choose? The stability of a company, whether they've been around a long time, if they're a startup and simply looking to get purchased, or things like the security of your data. Once you've applied importance to each of these categories, you'll realize that there's actually subcategories to these, especially if you think about features and tools. You'll have to think, what workflows do I want? So make sure you prioritize those before you start your search. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Sherilyn for our final poll question.
Thanks, Kevin. So we just heard how to prioritize your needs and how important it is to do that. So we want to know, what are you looking for in a construction management solution? Are you looking for storage and distribution of files? Are you looking for the admin tools like RFIs, submittals, punch lists? Are you looking for an app that integrates easily with other apps? Are you looking for reporting for firm, project, and user levels? And are you looking for something that really is, provides a lot of security? Where are you, what are your thoughts on all of those? What is your priority? What are you really looking for? What is the main feature, the main goal that you have for choosing that construction management software? We've got about 7 more seconds left to the poll. And it's kind of an overwhelming construction admin workflows, the RFIs, submittals, punch lists, the tools to manage your project. So thank you, everyone, for participating in all the poll questions. We definitely appreciate the feedback. And with that, I'm going to bring back Kevin, and we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Thanks, Sherilyn. with that, I think we can go ahead and jump right into the first question.
Let's see. Let's just start with the first one that came in. What is the process if I want to change my current project management software?
That's a fantastic question. So if you already have a project management software, really what you're trying to look at is the data exchange process, right? How do I move my data from one platform into another? So I would suggest starting off by exploring existing integrations and services that the vendor offers. So lots of construction management software already has existing integrations with other vendors, but also with generic document management providers such as Dropbox, Box, and so on. If that integration exists, it's going to allow you to easily import and export your data from one solution to another. If not, many software vendors actually will do this for you and transfer your data again from that existing software into another. So that's something you can look at during the evaluation process and exploring the existing integrations.
So Kevin, the next question, and we've heard a little bit about this before, so it's a good question. They asked, I'm a Buzzsaw user, what are my options and what should I look for?
Yeah, another good question, because I think as most of you know, Buzzsaw is discontinuing next week, I believe, January 31st. So if you're just starting the evaluation process, you might be a little bit behind, but better late than never. So I know that Buzzsaw primarily focused on document management and supporting BIM workflows. So you have to decide if those are still things that are important to you or if there's additional tools that are more important now. So nowadays, there's lots of solutions that support BIM workflows and 3D modeling and document management, but they do a whole lot of other things in addition to that. So one thing I'll say is it's difficult to find a single solution that does every single thing you're looking for. So you're going to have to consider, is it a combination of products that I supplement Buzzsaw with, or is there a single provider that meets my needs that I can continue forward with and only put my data into that single solution?
So the next question we have that just came in is regarding the pricing structure. It's a huge factor for this company, and they want to know, is it per user, construction value, other? They want to know how SKYSITE structures their pricing.
So yeah, SKYSITE in particular is a per user fee, but you only pay for collaborative users. So what I mean by that is if you're adding content or creating content within SKYSITE, it's a paid user fee. If you're simply viewing and downloading, it's free. So you can have as many read-only users as you would like for free within SKYSITE. But SKYSITE charges differently than some of the other construction management solutions that are available out there. Some of them charge for storage, which again, you need to consider if that's important to you or not. SKYSITE charges a per user fee because it has unlimited storage. And if that's important to you, that's a benefit, so to speak, of SKYSITE. Others, some more enterprise solutions actually charge a percentage of your project cost. So asking that question during the evaluation process and largely how big your company is will influence that decision.
So we have a question of the ease of use for inputs on multiple devices. And they had an example that there is one software that's very difficult to use to get data input correctly.
Yeah, fantastic question. It's something that's often overlooked. We talked about the free trial process and testing out the software. You have to make sure that you test it out from your mobile devices in addition to your laptop, especially if you plan on utilizing tablets and smartphones and so on. So when you do so, you'll very easily see, hey, can I upload my files from a mobile device? Is it easy to collect data? And is that in fact syncing to the cloud instantaneously? The free trial process, as I mentioned prior, if you upload your own data, you're going to get a lot more insight into how usable the solution is. So if you go ahead and attempt that from a mobile device, it'll tell you exactly that, how easy or difficult the software that you're evaluating truly is.
Great answer. Thanks, Kevin. Let's see. The next question is there a certain type of project or time that's best to start using construction software?
We get that question quite often, and my answer is always the same. There's never a good time in construction. Based on my experience, I never had the time to, or it never seemed like a good time because everybody is so busy and running around, and that's generally how the construction industry works. So if you're waiting for the perfect time to implement a construction management solution, you're likely never going to. Take that piece of advice that we gave earlier on, right? It's much easier to implement on one project initially and then start to push it out slowly company-wide rather than pushing it out widely throughout your whole company to all of your projects. So my advice is, once you decide on a software, select the next project that's about to start and run with it.
Great. And actually, with that question, it looks like we've run out of time today. Kevin, thank you. That was an awesome discussion today. We really appreciate you being here and taking the time. And I'd especially like to thank all of you that joined us today. And remember, the webinar was recorded. It'll be sent to you and available to anyone that missed it. And we also want you to feel free to pass it on to anyone that you think might like it. There were a lot of great questions today, and we really tried to answer as many of them as we could. But if you have any questions that didn't get answered, or if you would like to schedule a demo, or just want more information, please definitely contact us at solutions@e-arc.com. It's right up there on your screen. And our team is ready, and they can provide you with any of the information you need. So with that, we'll sign off here. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.